Well, this is probably gonna be a short one. I hope. I also hope Shueisha doesn't do their thing and take down my video. I've removed all the text from the speech bubbles, hoping that it dodges some of the potential issues, but who knows? Either way, that's beside the point. You're all here to see me talk about the much maligned Toriyama-penned prequel to Dragon Ball that overwrites the TV special I already talked about not that long ago. Or you're here to kill me with pitchforks and torches, maybe a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. Either way, let's find out if Dragon Ball Minus is really worth the hate it gets. Dragon Ball Minus, of course, came out as a bonus chapter as part of the single-volume Jocko the Galactic Patrolman manga Akira Toriyama wrote and drew around the time Battle of Gods came out. At least if my memory holds up. It depicted a very different origin story for Son Goku, and many people reject it due to it being too different from the popular TV special that came out during the middle of the Frieza arc back in the early 90s. One of the biggest complaints I hear about Minus is that they made Bardock too nice and friendly compared to his TV special incarnation, who was a murderous soldier. Which makes a lot of sense, seeing as how Minus literally begins with Bardock and another Saiyajin, apparently named Leek according to the DBS movie, wiping out a bunch of people. Actually, can we appreciate how funny it is that Leek is just sitting there killing a guy while casually answering his scouter? That being said, Leek isn't super important to the story. Much like Toma in the TV special, he's mostly just there to bounce information off of. He actually has probably less of a presence overall. They get a call telling the entire race to return to Vegeta.
Wait, my son, the planet or me?
And, oh, hey! Bardock's not a complete nincompoop here, and immediately begins questioning the situation. Leek mentions that he's never heard of such a situation before, with Bardock quickly telling him to remove his scouter so Frieza's men can't hear him. The two of them see Frieza's ship on their way back to the planet, and Bardock begins to think something's not right, but Leek brushes it off as him just overthinking things. And yeah, this isn't all that different from the Saiyajin in the bar ignoring Bardock in the TV special, at least to some degree. At least this time he's not bleeding out all over the place, though. Also, I feel like I should quickly mention the art. Of course it's friggin' great! It's Akira Toriyama! The paneling flows as amazing as ever, and every panel feels like it serves a purpose. There's very little wasted space, and his detailed characters look fantastic. The only downside is he tends to draw characters a bit scrawny these days, but even then, everything feels like it's adapted to that art style, so it never feels out of place. The character anatomy never feels off due to it. And as always, the angles and everything he draws feel right on point. The man knows exactly where to focus an image for impact. It really does make it a shame that he won't do any full-on manga anymore, but I certainly can't blame the man for retiring. Also, his design sense is as present as ever. From Guinea to the aliens Bardock annihilates to the hilarious extras in the background, there's just so much of his trademark personality throughout. But I've fanboyed enough over the man and should probably get back to talking about the story. Upon arrival, they're greeted by a Saiyajin who mentions that Bardock's been away for a while, something echoing an earlier line, and at one point it's mentioned that it may have been around 3 years since he was last on world. I like this aspect. It suggests that Frieza's soldiers, or at least the Saiyajin, tend to be off-world for years at a time, something that was suggested way back in the Saiyajin arc of the original manga and anime, when Vegeta and Nappa went into stasis for a year before arriving on Earth. It even took Frieza a year to make it back to Earth after Goku beat his ass ragged, although it's not entirely clear if that's due to the time it took to make him a cyborg, or how long it took to find him, etc., etc. Anyway, Bardock immediately asks why Frieza had them all summoned back. He's told that they weren't given any specific reason, just that Frieza's men had been asking about the legendary Super Saiyajin. The scene jumps over to Frieza, who's told by one of his henchmen that these are likely just heroic legends and hold no real water. Frieza agrees, but decides it's best not to leave it up to chance. He then mentions that the Saiyajin are too proud to ever truly be loyal to him, and decides to just blow them up. Just like that. He sets a date for a month later to get the majority of them, and then figures he'll just cover it up by saying a meteor hit the planet when explaining it to any survivors. No inconsistent, this was Frieza's idea, even though the only one who suggested it was Zarbon stuff. No flickering emotions on it. He's just like, meh, I'm gonna blow him up. We also briefly see Raditz and Vegeta,
wait, my son, the planet or me?
Discussing the matter. Good old Jeet says, screw it, we'll just pretend we didn't hear it, while surrounded by corpses. Kid Vegeta seems to like doing that regardless of the medium. Also, he doesn't have that stupid hair like in the TV special, as trademark Widow's Peak is present. Oddly enough, we don't see Nappa here, or at all in this chapter. Apparently this has been addressed in the new movie, but we're strictly talking about Minus here, so I'm not going to count it. And that does mean it's a slight knock against Minus, just as the TV special ignoring Raditz is an issue. There's also a brief blurb about the Saiyajin population only being in the thousands due to their warlike nature, and it's pretty believable. Everyone, even store owners and children, are wearing armor, and they live in crude-looking houses that seem to be just a slight step up from caves. Again, I like this touch. We never really got to see anything regarding their civilization prior, and while it's not much, it's more than just all of them being mercenaries. Here we meet Gene, Bardock's wife, a poor soldier who retired from fighting and became a butcher. And she too wears armor. Speaking of which, when can we get that armor in Xenoverse? They briefly embrace and Bardock asks where Raditz is, before being told that he's already become a combatant and was partnered with the prince. We then finally see his other son, Kakaroto. Gene mentions that he's been in the incubation chamber for about 3 years, although I'm not exactly sure what those chambers do, as it's never really stated. Still, this shows that he had already been born and that he should have at least some interaction with the world around him, so it's not all that shocking that his brother would expect him to not have forgotten him. Also, the image in the chamber is a direct callback to an early scene when Raditz arrives on Earth. That being said, somebody give that boy a sandwich! No wonder he's always so damn hungry! Bardock then suggests that he's stealing an infiltration pod to send the child elsewhere. When Gene questions this, as being an infiltrator is a dangerous job, Bardock says it's specifically for his son's safety, that he senses Frieza is up to something. That night, the two of them sneak off with Kakaroto in an infiltration pod away from their village. Once again, there's been a complaint toward this chapter for making Bardock too soft-hearted compared to his TV special counterpart, which Gine herself addresses for me by mentioning that it's not like him to be worried about his kid. Bardock snarks that it's her fault and that she simply rubbed off on him. When she suggests that they all escape together, Bardock mentions that it's too dangerous and that Frieza's men could track them. He talks about a frontier planet named Earth having plenty of food and the people of the planet being a minimal threat, so it should be safe for Kakaroto there. Gine tells her son that if Bardock's wrong about this, they'll come and get him ASAP, and then mentions that she'll let Raditz know that his brother's been sent off. Again, I'll bring up a criticism often brought against this story. Many people mention that Raditz should have known his brother was sent to Earth for his safety, and that this is a direct contradiction to the original manga. But this ties back into the earlier part of the story. Frieza and his minions can hear the broadcast over communications, so she'd likely keep the info to a minimum. Frieza is unlikely to go to Earth to wipe out one child monkey, given his impatience as is. With that, Bardock tells his son that he has to survive. Kakaroto is launched off the planet as his parents watch, knowing that this may very well be the last time they ever see him. There's a quick cut to the Galactic Patrol here, but that ties more into the Jocko manga than it does into the main Dragon Ball plot, so we're gonna skip over that since it's not super relevant here. However, I will mention something outside of Minus directly from the final chapter of the Jocko manga. We briefly see Kakaroto scarfing down food on an old man's table, who mentions that if he weren't a martial artist, the boy might have actually been real trouble for whoever stumbled on him. He offers the child a home despite his bad manners, says that since he didn't learn the boy's name, he'll just refer to him as Son Goku. Of course, every fan of the series should be aware this is Goku's adopted grandfather, Gohan. Obviously, this is before Goku falls and hits his head scrambling his brains, but it's a nice way of showing just how wild and powerful he was, just as Roshi had described him when he recalls the story of what Gohan had told him. Anyway, outside of that bit from the end of the Jocko manga, Minus doesn't actually have any sort of real ending after his parents sent him to Earth. It just cuts to a blurb about how the planet was wiped out and settles with a final image of a grown Son Goku during his confrontation with Frieza decades later. The battle in which Frieza faces the very legend he sought to destroy before it became a threat. Bit of an oopsie there. So, are there fair criticisms of Dragon Ball Minus? Certainly. Mostly that it's just far too damn short. I would have liked it to have shown the events leading to Bardock's rebellion and eventual death as depicted in the original manga. But the stuff about it retconning Bardock into a wuss or that it makes Goku special always confuses me. Bardock is shown to be a capable warrior, obliterating populations away from his home and family for years at a time, and having some level of actual instinct. As I said in my review of the TV special, Bardock's kind of a complete dumbass in it, as even after getting ambushed by Frieza's men, being told by both them and his dying comrade that Frieza plans to blow up the planet, and having multiple very obvious psychic visions about it, it's not until he actually arrives that he realizes it's all true. Here, when he begins to get unsettled, he does act on it. And as for Goku, even though they refer to him as a fated child in the narration and even the full title, he honestly comes off as less destined to fight Frieza, except beyond the fact that he did indeed one day grow up and defeat the Emperor. It also helps that he's a big motivation behind Bardock's actions, rather than just merely existing like he did in the special. That being said, as an overall story, yeah, it's inferior to the TV special, which is just a lot more exciting and flowing. Minus simply just doesn't have enough content in it. I stand by my belief that Minus works better in the overall story of Dragon Ball, and works a lot better in terms of world building, and really just in common sense, but in a vacuum, the special just has a lot more going for it, some of it by virtue of being 45 minutes instead of being less than 20 pages, and some of it is simply by trying to make the TV special be more grand in scope. At the same time, perhaps focusing on a smaller scale is something that benefited the chapter. By not having a bunch of extra, meaningless characters, it allows the ones who are there to have more purpose to their inclusion. So no, I don't think Dragon Ball Minus is worth the hate. It has its flaws for sure, but in its brief time, it really does fix a lot of continuity issues I had with the TV special, and many of the things people claim about the chapter simply are not true. The best way I can sum it up is comparing it to the depiction of Goku in the incubation chamber. It ties in well back with the main story of Dragon Ball, but it needs some more meat on its bones. It tells us a few important things about the overall story and fixes some continuity errors, but it's also severely lacking in overall content. Beyond that, do I recommend it? Maybe? I mean, in the overall grand scheme of Dragon Ball, it really does help things make a bit more sense and clears up some issues with the original story. If you just watch Dragon Ball for the big dumb fights, it's probably not necessary, though. But you're missing out on half the fun if you do that. It's definitely flawed, and you're not missing a ton by skipping it, but I like what it brought to the table.
Someone needs a sandwich.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Agree? Disagree? Probably a lot of disagreements. But if you're not out for my blood, why not check out some of my other videos, like my review on the aforementioned TV special, or perhaps check out my review of Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods. Maybe you want something a bit more action-packed, like my unskilled playthrough of Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit.